The cargo bay of the derelict station echoed with the soft hum of failing life support systems. James crouched beside a makeshift shelter constructed from salvaged metal sheets, carefully adjusting the temperature controls on a portable heater. In his arms, a small bundle stirred, not human but unmistakably alive. The Zephyrian infant was no larger than a human newborn, its translucent blue skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed weakly with each breath. James had found the baby 3 days ago in the wreckage of a destroyed ship. Clutching, a data pad with feeding instructions written in broken standard. "Easy there, little one," James whispered, preparing another bottle of the specialized nutrient formula he'd synthesized from the ship's emergency supplies. The baby's large, dark eyes, so unlike human eyes yet somehow conveying the same desperate need, fixed on him with trust that made his chest tighten. A sound echoed through the station's corridors. Footsteps. James tensed, shifting the infant protectively. After the consortium's attack on the civilian fleet, nowhere felt safe. He'd thought this abandoned research station would provide sanctuary, while he figured out how to get the baby to safety. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a low, melodic humming. James recognized the tune, a Zephyrian lullaby he'd heard in the data files. His heart raced as a figure appeared in the doorway. Lisa stood there, her elongated form draped in the flowing robes typical of her species. Her skin held the same, translucent quality as the infant's, but deeper blue, and marked with intricate silver patterns that spoke of age and wisdom. Her forearms hung limp at her sides, her large eyes wide with disbelief and desperate hope. "My child," she breathed in accented standard, taking a hesitant step forward. "My Kythera." James remained still, assessing the situation. The baby in his arms began to glow more brightly, its patterns synchronizing with those of the approaching Zephyrian. There was no doubt. This was the infant's mother. "She's safe," James said softly, making no move to rise. "I've been caring for her." Lisa's eyes filled with what could only be tears, though they shimmered like liquid starlight. "The ship. Everyone said there were no survivors. The consortium destroyers, they left nothing. She was in an emergency pod, hidden in the cargo hold." James carefully stood, still holding the baby. "The life support was failing when I found her." Lisa approached slowly, her movements careful and unthreatening. As she drew near, James could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way her robes hung torn and stained. She'd been searching, probably for days. "I don't understand," Lisa whispered, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Why would a human save a Zephyrian child? Your species and mine. We've been at war for 3 cycles. James looked down at the infant, who was now reaching tiny hands toward her mother, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. "Because she needed help," he said simply. "Because she's just a baby." The profound simplicity of his answer seemed to stagger Lisa. In Zephyrian culture, cross-species assistance was virtually unheard of. Their society was built on rigid hierarchies and species loyalty. The idea that someone would risk their life for a child of another species defied everything she understood about the universe. "The feeding schedule you left," James continued, reaching into his pack to retrieve the data pad. "I followed it exactly. She's been eating well, sleeping through most of the night cycles." Lisa's 4 hands trembled as she accepted the device. On its screen were detailed logs, feeding times, sleep patterns, even notes about the baby's preferences and moods. The care and attention to detail were meticulous. You learned our language for this?" she asked, noticing the Zephyrian characters James had painstakingly added to his notes. "Enough to understand her needs." James smiled softly. "She's quite expressive when she's hungry." As if summoned by his words, the baby began to fuss. Without thinking, Lisa reached out and James carefully transferred the infant to her mother's arms. The moment they touched, both Zephyrians began to glow brilliantly, their patterns creating a complex light show that filled the dim cargo bay with dancing colors. Lisa held her daughter close, her song-like humming filling the air. But her eyes never left James's face. In all the histories of our people, she said, there is no record of such kindness from another species. You could have left her. You could have used her as a bargaining chip instead. Instead, I did what any decent person would do. James interrupted gently. Species doesn't matter when it comes to protecting children. The simple truth of it was revolutionary. Here was a human who had risked his life, spent his resources, and dedicated days to caring for an alien infant, not for political gain, not for leverage in war, but simply because it was right. Lisa's worldview, built on centuries of species-centric thinking, crumbled and reformed in an instant. If humans were capable of such compassion, such selfless care for their supposed enemies' young, then everything the Zephyrian High Council taught about the inherent evil of other species was wrong. The war, she said quietly, it doesn't have to continue. James nodded. There's enough suffering in the galaxy without us adding to it. As Lisa held her daughter, watching the human who had become the child's unlikely guardian, she realized she was witnessing something that would indeed shake the entire galaxy. Not through violence or conquest, but through the simple recognition that compassion transcends species boundaries. When the rescue ships arrived hours later, they found an unprecedented sight. A human and a Zephyrian working together, caring for an infant who had become the bridge between two warring species. Lisa's testimony about James's kindness spread quickly through Zephyrian space, sparking debates that would ultimately lead to peace talks. Years later, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of the end of the human-Zephyrian war. But James never sought recognition for his role. In galactic peace, he simply returned to his ship, knowing that somewhere in the vast cosmos, a little girl named Cathera was growing up in a universe where kindness had proven stronger than hatred. The galaxy had indeed been shaken, not by weapons or politics, but by the profound realization that at their core, all sentient beings shared the same capacity for love, compassion, and the instinctive drive to protect the innocent.